Ladies and gentlemen, the Dean of Drexel University, LeBeau College of Business, Frank Linehan.
My faculty always say I talk loud enough for them, but I was going to say that timing is everything in life, and coming after that last presentation, Farah has some big shoes to fill. But I want to welcome you to the LeBeau College of Business and Drexel University. This is a perfect place. We're honored, actually, to be able to host the ThinkFest, because Drexel is about innovation. And most of you know that we are planning a huge project, the vision of our great President Farah, across the street here in Market. This is the beginning of the footprint of what will be called our innovation neighborhood. There are 6 million square feet that will be developed just north here, out to 30th Street Station, and it's going to transform not only this university, but our goal is to transform Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, economically, socially, and as a hub of innovation. So again, we hope that you enjoyed today. We're honored to be part of this event. I'd like to encourage you to visit some of our career counselors that we have in the main lobby that will be available to do some career coaching, look at resumes, those types of things as a service to ThinkFest. But it is my honor today to introduce Farah Jimenez. Farah was the former president of People's Emergency Center. She is currently on the School Reform Commission, having been shown incredible trust in appointing this commission to this commission. This is a thankless job, and it's unbelievable. We were just talking backstage about her passion to make a difference in Philadelphia. So I think you're in for a real treat today. Her topic this morning is shaking up the system, rethinking how we solve social problems. So please join me in welcoming Farah Jimenez.
Thank you so much, Frank. And thank you for all of you who've already begun with a standing ovation for my comments today. I have to tell you, I'm not going to be quite as funny as the panel that you heard before. I'm talking about something fairly serious. And before I begin, I also just want to share that I think there's something you should know about me. Though I've been working in the nonprofit sector for more than 20 years, and during that tenure, I have to tell you, not once in those 20 years have I ever been accused of having a bleeding heart. And it's true, I grew up in a conservative Christian home. My parents were immigrants. And having escaped communism, they taught my sister and me 3 important things. They felt it was important for us to love our country that had given us so much, to vote so that we would ensure the liberties would persist, and to tithe. That no matter how little or how much we had, that it was our obligation to return a portion so that it might help others. And every Sunday, my sister and I, when we would sit in the church pews, we had no money of our own, but our parents would give us 50 cents or $1, and when the tray would be passed around, we would put in our offering. And I love taking part in this tradition. But I confess I often wondered, where did that money go? Did it make any difference? And when I would ask, what happens to the offering? Who is it helping? How do we know it's helping them? I would be gently but quickly hushed. I was taught that we are commanded to give, and that we are then to trust God that these gifts are used to His glory. I guess that wasn't a particularly satisfying answer for me, because today, despite nearly 20 years in the social sector, working and leading nonprofits in Washington, D.C., New Haven, Connecticut, and Philadelphia, I am still asking the same question. Are we making a difference? Philadelphia has a 26% poverty rate. Are we making a difference? Since the pronouncement of President Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, we've spent an estimated $22 trillion on anti-poverty initiatives. Did it make a difference? And every year, just in this 5-county region, the social or nonprofit sector, comprised of 15,000 agencies, generates more than $35 billion in revenue and employs nearly 250,000 people. Those are big numbers, big investments, but is it making a difference? So my purpose today, interestingly enough, is not to actually answer that question. it's not really to answer whether or not we're making a difference. I don't think that's an easy yes or no. Or at least we can't really answer it right now. My goal today is to ask that we think bigger and we think differently. My goal today is that we shift our mindset, that we examine the ways in which we avoid the question I've just posed. How do we challenge the orthodoxy that at times keeps us from examining our collective work and insisting on the answer, are we making a difference? So several years ago, I decided to volunteer overnight at a shelter for families experiencing homelessness. I started my shift in the evening. After assisting with dinner duty and cleanup, I spent a sleepless night. My accommodations were nothing more than a mattress on the floor of a case manager office. They weren't great, but who was I to complain? At least I had a home to go to. In the morning, dressed in my uniform, which was a black t-shirt and black pants, I rose early to assist with breakfast. Breakfast was served, as you see in most hotel chains, buffet style, from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Breakfast consisted of hot oatmeal, eggs, milk, juices, cereal, and toast, and I was assigned to work the cereal and toast section of the buffet. So what was my job? So while on cereal duty, my job was to wait for a young mother to come and to ask for a particular breakfast cereal for her or her child, and then to pour her selection into a bowl. While on toast duty, my assignment was pretty much the same. Mom would pick white, wheat, or rye, and I would put it in the toaster and then plate it when done. Easy enough, but I couldn't shake the idea that this was bad, that what I was doing was unnecessary at best and demeaning at worst. These were capable women. Low income, yes, homeless, yes, but capable women. Women responsible for the children in their care. Why were we pouring cereal and toasting their bread? To arrive at that answer, let me share another story. A former colleague of mine took me aside one day to share a complaint about a colleague, a fellow employee. She tells me she was not a good fit for our employment and training program. She insisted she's not alone in this observation, that her other coworkers agreed this employee is not a good fit. Why, I asked. Well, we are just not convinced that she cares about our clients. Huh. I was stunned. I knew this employee spent countless hours and non-work hours trying to secure jobs for our hardest to place clients. And during each program cycle, she'd have more than 80% of our program participants placed and working. I didn't understand the assertion. Well, I kind of did. What I didn't understand is why it mattered. I asked my colleague, how can you measure what's in her heart? And frankly, who cares? Isn't it enough that she gets some jobs? Isn't that the only important measure? Now it was her turn to be stunned. That moment, that exchange was an aha moment for me. My colleague was all heart, and I, on the other hand, was all head. She felt it valuable information whether one demonstrated a passion and a caring for the clients we served. I didn't really care about that so much. After all, I'd already been accused of not having a bleeding heart. Instead, I wanted to know, how did this employee make a difference in the lives we served? I recognized I stunned my colleague into silence by dismissing her heartfelt concern. No question, it is important that those who serve care about those whom we serve. Displaying empathy and concern to those we serve does facilitate the healing and the empowerment of our city's most vulnerable. But if we give the heart too much authority over the head, we risk harming those we wish to help. We pour the cereal of grown adults as a sign of caring and love, but in so doing, we rob those same adults of that one opportunity they have to exhibit self-reliance in an environment where they have absolutely no control over their lives. We rob them of a simple act to preserve dignity, to not have to ask for help, but to be able to do something as simple as pour the cereal and toast the bread for themselves and their children. The focus on heart and love as a basis of charity work predates even our nation's founding. Many attribute the charitable underpinning of the United States to a sermon delivered in 1630 by John Winthrop. His sermon, a model of Christian charity, delivered to early American settlers aboard the Arbella, prepare these settlers for the tough road ahead and argue that interdependence and mutual support would be the key to their success and not just survival, but thriving. In his words, "So a mother loves her child because she thoroughly conceives a resemblance of herself in it. Thus it is between the members of Christ each discerns by the work of the Spirit his own image and resemblance in another, and therefore cannot but love him as he loves himself." Poetic, what it means is we're all one body. We support one another because we love one another. And love is good. I'm not arguing against love. I love that people are moved by love, by their heart. But that love, that heart, can keep us from challenging convention and getting to the answers of the questions we don't like to ask. So for several years, I led a social service agency in Philadelphia. Its mission was to serve women and children experiencing homelessness. At dinner parties and social gatherings, I would often get asked about our work. And the question I would get asked most often was, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do to end family homelessness? My response was always the same. I'd do two things. First, I would make sure that every child was enrolled in a quality school where they could learn and develop their fullest potential. That often elicited nods and an occasional amen. Second, I would ensure that every child was born in wedlock. Horror. Usually the response was complete and utter horror. How could I be so incredibly insensitive? And I imagine some of you in this room have had a visceral reaction to my number 2 response. I know, forgive me, I don't really do political correctness very well, but just as a reminder, I already shared with you that I've never been accused of being a bleeding heart. Bleeding hearts don't usually say what I just said. Why? Because it sounds insensitive. It sounds like I'm blaming the victim. In 1965, while serving as Assistant Secretary of Labor under President Lyndon Johnson, Daniel Patrick Moynihan authored a report entitled "The Negro Family, the Case for National Action." When he set out on this research, his goal was to prove the prevailing theory that economic conditions drive social conditions. However, his research led him to argue the inverse, that social conditions vastly influence economic conditions. He argued that the breakdown of the African American family, the disproportionate rates of out-of-wedlock births, the absence of fathers in 25% at that time, 25% of African American homes, were the issues that led to poverty. And if not addressed, these conditions would stymie the socioeconomic mobility of African Americans in the United States. Moynihan's work was repudiated. Indeed, it was passionately criticized for being sexist, racist, classist. He was accused of blaming the victim or of just being plain wrong. But what was true then is still true today. In fact, it's more true today. The data may not be what we want it to be, but it doesn't lie. Putting aside how we choose to frame the narrative around why 72% of all births to African American women are out of wedlock compared to 25% in 1965, when Moynihan published this study, we can't ignore the fact that more than 90% of the families in shelter are comprised of single mothers and their children. If we want to really address this problem, we need to confront the facts before us and use them as a starting place to design a response to the social problem, to design a response to generational poverty. We can do so with empathy and understanding, be clear, but if we ignore our heads because the facts break our hearts, then we need to ask ourselves, are we really committed to solving family homelessness and generational poverty, or do we just want to feel good trying? If the social sector is really to address the social problems that plague us, we need to be willing to ask the question and sit with the answer, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Imagine if we had been willing to confront the inconvenient truth in Moynihan's research at that time. Instead of catching so many families after the fall, might we have been able to prevent so many families from entering our system? The modern-day equivalent of the Moynihan study, playing out right here in Philadelphia, is the fight for the $15 minimum wage. Those who argue for it rightly point out that the current minimum wage is insufficient to support the basic needs of an individual, let alone a family. Those who argue against it claim that markets are powerful forces and increased personnel cost will force employers to reduce their workforce and increase their innovation and dependence on automation to reduce labor costs, i.e., a lucky few will earn more, but many others will be out of jobs. Consider a different perspective. When I was a young CEO, I was in need of an administrative assistant, and I prepared to interview a woman who, in her polished dress and elegant carriage, made quite a positive impression. I was not disappointed. She had experience, she had poise, she had a professional demeanor, and I was being no dummy. I offered her the job right on the spot. Of course, I expected her to be thrilled, or at least a little happy, and she wasn't either. And I could feel the energy in the room shift. She asked if we could negotiate her salary, and of course, in my head, I braced myself. I was doing the math to figure out how much I could afford to increase the salary I was offering her. Then she spoke. "Thank you for the job offer. I'd like to accept, but I need to tell you something. A few years ago, I suffered a severe injury, and as a result of that injury, I now receive a government benefit that I can't afford to lose. Your offer is generous, but it's too generous for me. I'm afraid I'll lose my benefit. Would you be willing to give me less hours of work? Because frankly, if I can't earn less, I can't afford to work." Indeed, our hearts tell us that the solution to income inequality is a higher minimum wage. But if we really want to help individuals climb the socioeconomic ladder, we need to be willing to challenge ourselves to consider whether the solution that feels good, feels right in the near term, is really the solution that will do good in the long term. Many Philadelphia nonprofits are attempting to make the shift from a heart to head model. And some of this shift is precipitated to an internal awakening. After 30 years of trying to tackle a problem like homelessness with little headway, maybe it's time to try a different approach. For others, the pressure to change is driven by external factors. In the 1970s, during the rapid expansion of the nonprofit sector nationally, many agencies grew quickly under what I call the "how could you not fill in the blank" funding model. How could you not fund hunger relief? How could you not fund housing, literacy, daycares, etc., whatever program? And it was a plea to the heart, and funders responded in kind with their hearts. They gave and trusted that the gift that they gave would be used in God's glory. Not anymore. According to the Bloomberg News, the fastest growing sector in our economy is the nonprofit sector, growing in number by 25% over the last 10 years. The growth trend is likely to continue, and it won't likely be matched by equal contraction. After all, how many nonprofits have any of you heard close? More nonprofits doesn't mean more money for the work. As such, many agencies are finding it harder to find that donor's heart. They need to prove themselves, prove that their work drives impact, prove that its donor's gift is an actual investment in the solution of a societal problem. And in Philadelphia, pushing from this head-led, data-driven, prove-it approach to the work are two, believe it or not, agencies that are making a real difference. The City of Philadelphia and a Boston-based disruptor called the Greenlight Fund. In 2013, Mayor Michael Nutter established a city agency called the Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity. Led by Eva Gladstein, the agency published a shared prosperity plan, and its purpose was not to run any particular program, but rather to become the central repository of data, metrics, and measures that would enable us as a city, as a collective, as partners in the nonprofit community with the city, to set collective goals for poverty alleviation, and to hold ourselves, most importantly, collectively accountable. So the work was less about, do I feel like I'm doing a good job? And it was more about, are we having an impact as a sector? We need more of this kind of collective accountability to elevate the head as we consider the heart that moves in so many ways in this work. In 2012, a disruptor called the Greenlight Fund entered the Philadelphia marketplace. Founded by John Simon, a Boston-based venture capitalist, the fund takes a different approach to solving localized social problems. It funds market expansion of non-Philadelphia-based nonprofits with an evidence base and extensive evaluative studies that prove that their program design and implementation model indeed moves the needle on the social problem they have at hand. And over the past 2 years, Greenlight Fund in Philadelphia has helped place 2 education-based agencies expand into Philadelphia to aid with college permanence, helping students in community college and Pierce College who in the past may have found their barriers to continuing their education insurmountable, helping them figure out how to get the resources and supports they need so their education not be interrupted. Organized to do one thing and to do one thing well, these agencies don't attract donations, they attract investment. There's no guessing whether or not they're moving the needle. They insist on hard evidence and learn from their mistakes and learn from their data, adjust their model, and keep trying until they can prove their success. So as I've said before, despite 20 years in the nonprofit sector, I've never been accused of being a bleeding heart, but I must confess that my heart might skip a hopeful beat should we as a community become willing to sit with the discomfort in our hearts as we steady ourselves against political correctness, invite debate on populist ideas and notions, and hold ourselves accountable for impact. Maybe I can convince you today it's not so bad to be accused of missing a bleeding heart.